in the 19th century, the slow and long decline finally reached its conclusion with the catalyst, the wrong catalyst, the incorrect catalyst of the Ottomans joining the wrong side in World War I. They joined the side of Germany against the Allied forces. And what really hurts us, they didn't need to have gotten involved. Hindsight's 2020. They didn't need to have gotten involved in this war. It was not our war. The Great War, as it was called back then, World War I, you could have remained neutral as the Middle East. You didn't have to get involved. For reasons, again, beyond the scope of our lecture, the Ottomans did get involved. And they got involved with the wrong side. But see, this was the catalyst. For over 150 years, the decline had already begun. This was just the final catalyst when the Ummah, when the Khalifa sided with the German side. Khalas, this gave carte blanche authority to the Allied forces, to England, to others, to attack directly the Ottoman lands, which is exactly what they did. They marched into Damascus, they marched into Palestine, they marched into Baghdad, and they marched into Istanbul, Constantinople. And they conquered one land after another in perhaps the greatest tragedy since the invasion of Genghis Khan, perhaps the greatest tragedy. Actually, really, it is the greatest tragedy after the Mongol invasion. It is the greatest tragedy what happened around World War I with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Now, today's lecture is not about that. I've given other lectures about that. We're talking about the end of the Khilafah. Now, the defeat of Germany and the defeat of the Ottoman Empire is happening not out in a vacuum. Internally, there is a strong movement within Turkey that called themselves the Young Turks. The Young Turks. You should know this term. The Young Turks were extremely popular amongst the educated elite who wanted to copy Europe, especially France. They loved France. And France's version of democracy is very different than American version of democracy. France's democracy is anti-religion. You know, they have a notion called laïcité. You should look it up. And the Young Turks were enamored with the French. They loved this notion of separating deen from politics. So the Young Turks from the 1860s onwards began fomenting a hatred against the Khilafah. And they called for a new democratic republic, secular in nature, Turkish in identity, not Islamic. And they invented this concept of nationalism. And these ideas resonated with many people in these lands that were looking for a change. So, with World War I coming to an end, with the Allied forces invading, with the Ottoman Sultan essentially having to give up power, this gave the opportunity for another force to rise up. And this was a force of the Young Turks, along with a very charismatic general, Mustafa Kamal, known as Ataturk. Mustafa Kamal was not exactly a part of the Young Turks, but he jumped on the bandwagon. And he had similar visions to them. Mustafa Kamal took on charge of the army, make a long story short, and he expelled the Allied forces. He reconquered Turkey. He expelled the Allied forces, and initially he did so under the command of the Sultan. But as soon as he gained power, well then what do military generals do, right? What do people with power do? He realized he doesn't need the Sultan. So he created another parliament. Now that he's gotten rid of the British and he has now control of Turkey, he declares the Republic of Turkey a new nation state. And he brings in a complete new parliament. And in November of 1922, Mustafa Kamal abolishes the office of the Sultan. Listen carefully. Abolishes the office of the Sultan. And he makes a nominal Khilafah, like the Queen of England, just a figurehead, because before this time the Sultan was in charge. Before this time the Sultan is in charge of power. In 1922, this is more than 100 years ago, Mustafa Kamal, I will not call him Ataturk, I don't consider him the father of the Turks, but he's Mustafa Kamal, they call him Ataturk. Mustafa Kamal abolished the Ottoman Sultan, and he created a shadow puppet, a empty figure like the Queen of England. And he said, this is now a Khalifa, not the Sultan. And he deposed the actual sultan, and Sultan Mehmed VI was his name. He deposed the sultan. The sultan fled for his life, first to Malta, then to Italy, and he died. And he chose some random cousin that he knew he could control. That cousin, Abdul Majid II, he was a noble man, but he had never had any power. Abdul Majid II was put in charge for 2 years. By the way, Abdul Majid's daughter married who? Guys, go back. The Nizam of Hyderabad. This is Abdul Majid's daughter. Okay? So Abdul Majid is put as a nominal Khalifa with zero power. Is just like a figurehead. And power is in the Republic. This is 1922. But you see, this person, Mustafa Kamal, I mean, no doubt he is very charismatic, but he's also very cunning. I'm not going to take away from him. He is a leader, but I will say he's an evil leader, right? And he is long-term leader. Look at the stages. He didn't depose the Khilafah. He didn't want to take on the entire ummah. He gets rid of the Ottoman Sultan. He creates a shadow Khilafah, 2 years, and then in March of 1924, 99 years ago, this week, literally, March of 1924, he abolishes the parliament, the National Turkish Parliament, abolishes even the nominal figurehead Khilafah. And he tells Abdul Majid, you and your family get out of here with nothing. And so they fled, and I gave their story in another, khatira. But of course, this is just the beginning of his reforms, quote unquote. Eventually, he's going to abolish all of the Sharia courts. Eventually, he's going to ban the Arabic language. He's going to change the script of the Turkish language from Arabic into Latin, which is what it is now. He shuts down all of the madrasas. He bans hijab. It is illegal to wear the hijab and the fez cap. You know that fez cap, right? This was the symbol of the ummah at the time. The symbol of the ummah. It was common in India and Pakistan. There was no Pakistan. It was common in India. It was common in Egypt. It was common across the globe as the symbol of the ummah. He bans the wearing of the fez for the men and the hijab for the women. He says the adhan must be called in the Turkish language. You do not say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. You translate into Turkish. By the way, on YouTube there is a video from the 1930s of the Turkish adhan. Put it in, Turkish adhan. And you will hear, really sad, your heart breaks. Somebody's trying to say the adhan in Turkish according to the melodies of the adhan. Because Ataturk banned the adhan in Arabic. He wanted to ban the Quran in Arabic, but the ulama at least managed to preserve that one aspect. And he abolished all of the Sharia courts, and he made Turkey into a modern day France. He made Turkey into, that type of secular republic. So this is clearly an enemy to Allah and His Messenger. And of course, as we said, as a part of all of this, his goal clearly was to abolish the Khilafah. So he first abolished the Sultanate, and then he abolished the Khilafah in 1922.